In the quiet town of Narika, where elders still told stories under the moonlight, the students of Royal Heights Secondary School lived a life shaped by discipline, uniforms, and curfews. But deep behind their bright report cards and morning hymns, some of the older students had grown curious about the kind of freedom they watched in secret online and heard in foreign songs. A senior boy named Kelvin, charismatic and rebellious, whispered the first idea to his friends: "Let's have a party. A real one. No prefects. No teachers. No rules." His words caught fire quickly. Within a week, others were whispering too, girls like Tina and Lizzie giggling behind textbooks, boys sending messages under the desks. They began planning in secrecy. No one outside their circle could know, not teachers, not school security, and definitely not their parents. The location would be off campus, the time set after lights out, and what would happen? Well, that would become the secret that changed everything. Kelvin knew a student named Musa whose uncle owned a half-completed guest house on the edge of town. "No one goes there," Musa said with a smirk. "It's perfect." The dusty building, with flickering bulbs and broken tiles, became their secret Eden. Students took rows, some brought food, others sneaked out party clothes hidden under school uniforms. Lizzie, whose cousin had a speaker and DJ app on his phone, promised to bring music. "We'll make it a night to remember," she said. They agreed on a Friday night. Exam season had just ended, and supervision was low. What they didn't know was that one mistake, just one, would bring the entire world crashing down on their secret. On the night of the party, the students slipped out one by one. Some climbed over the school fence, others bribed night guards with food. Kelvin wore cologne. Lizzie changed into a dress she had hidden inside a stack of biology notes. There were about 27 students in total, boys and girls, some as young as 14. The guesthouse flickered with dim lights, and someone had even managed to bring sodas mixed with something stronger. The air was filled with excitement and danger. They danced wildly, took photos, and some of them crossed lines their innocence couldn't understand. What started as a simple, fun night turned into something more, something intimate, recorded, and tragically unguarded. The morning after, they returned to school silently, tired but proud, thinking they had pulled off the greatest secret of their young lives. But one boy, desperate for attention, posted a blurred video online. A kiss here. A bottle there. A girl dancing too closely. By the time the sun rose, the video had been reshared over 100 times. Parents, teachers, and even the local radio station began whispering of something terrible from Royal Heights School. The video was deleted quickly, but not before it reached the wrong eyes. Headmistress Madam Okoro received the clip at 10:14 a.m. She dropped her phone and whispered, "God help us." The students had no idea what storm was about to strike. By Monday morning, the entire school was in chaos. The assembly ground, usually a place for announcements and prayers, felt like a courtroom. Madam Okoro's voice was cold and thunderous. "You have embarrassed the school. You have embarrassed your families. And you have brought shame to this land." Some students were already crying. Parents had been called in. Reporters hovered outside the gates. The principal held up printed screenshots from the leaked video, blurred faces, but unmistakable uniforms. What was once a secret had become national disgrace. The government's education ministry was now involved. And for the students of Royal Heights, this was only the beginning of their painful journey back from shame. The school invited all the parents for an emergency meeting. Some came in tears, others in anger. Mothers clutched handbags like shields, fathers shook their heads in disbelief. The thought that their children had been involved in such a shameful act made many sick with worry and rage. "Is this what we sent you to school for?" one mother screamed at her daughter, who could not even lift her head. "We sell tomatoes in the sun to pay your fees, and this is how you repay us." The room was tense, and trust shattered. Parents who once bragged about their children's grades now hid behind scarves and dark glasses, afraid of being recognized by neighbors. The town of Nerika buzzed with gossip like a wasp nest poked by a stick. Madam Okoro had no choice. After reviewing the footage and identifying the students involved, she suspended 17 of them. Letters were sent home. Names were posted on the school's bulletin board for all to see. For those suspended, the weight of their mistake came crashing down. Kelvin, the original ringleader, tried to act tough but his eyes gave him away. Lizzie's mother fainted after reading her daughter's name on the list. One boy tried to run away to his grandmother's village. The media picked up the story. Headlines read, "Royal Heights in ruin," and "The Party of Shame." The country was shocked. How could teenagers do such a thing, and hide it so well? By Tuesday, the leaked video had been seen across Nigeria and even beyond. Celebrities weighed in online, some condemning, others expressing concern. Hashtags like #SaveOurYouth and #DisciplineMatters began to trend. The students involved became memes. Photos of their uniforms were posted next to dancing GIFs. The humiliation wasn't just local anymore, it was national. Some students who weren't even at the party were mistakenly accused and bullied. Tina, one of the girls, cried for hours. "I didn't even do anything serious," she whispered. "Just danced." But the internet didn't care about degrees of guilt, only drama. Not every student went to the party. Some had been invited but refused. A few like Adebi and Chuka felt pressure, but something inside them said no. Now they watched from the sidelines, shocked at how quickly their classmates' lives were spiraling. "I wanted to go," Chuka admitted to his friend. "But now I thank God I didn't." The silent students began to ask questions. Why did no one stop them? Where were the adults? Why did their friends hide such darkness behind laughter? Adebi started writing poems about peer pressure and regret. She didn't know it yet, but her words would soon bring healing to many who couldn't find the right voice. 1 black car. 2 men in suits. 3 folders full of disciplinary reports. The Ministry of Education officials arrived on campus with heavy faces and silent steps. Royal Heights would now be investigated. They interviewed teachers, students, even the night guards. Every rumor was taken seriously. The guest house was sealed. Musa's uncle was fined for allowing minors to use his property. The school's funding was under review. Madam Okoro sighed deeply in her office. "This school will not fall under my watch," she whispered to herself. But deep down, she knew Royal Heights would never be the same again. The students still at school formed a secret WhatsApp group named The Survivors. They discussed the aftermath, shared updates, and tried to figure out what would happen next. Some were angry, others scared, and a few tried to shift blame. Kelvin sent a voice note, "We didn't kill anybody. Why are they acting like we committed murder?" But many didn't agree. Even those who once admired him were now silent. Tina sent just one message, "I wish we could rewind time." The chat soon became a place of confession. Some apologized. Others left the group entirely. But the damage had already been done. And the truth? It was out in the open now, and it wasn't going back into hiding. The school invited a woman named Ngozi, an alumna who had once gone through a similar scandal in another school. She stood in front of the students in the hall and told her story, how one wrong choice had cost her a scholarship, her parents' trust, and almost her future. "But," she said, "I refuse to let that be my ending." She went back to school, worked harder, and eventually graduated top of her university class. Her eyes scanned the students gently. "Your mistake is big, but it doesn't have to define you forever." For the first time in weeks, some students cried openly. Kelvin lowered his head. Tina couldn't stop shaking. Even those who weren't caught felt the power of the story. It was a wake-up call. Obina, one of the quieter boys at the party, couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw his father's disappointed face. At school, people looked at him differently. At home, his siblings were forbidden to play with him. One evening, he went to the chapel alone. He lit a candle and whispered, "God, I messed up. I want to start again." That moment became a turning point. He began attending counseling, stopped blaming others, and even offered to speak to junior students about avoiding bad influences. The teachers noticed the change. One said, "There's hope in him yet." Obina realized that true regret isn't loud, it's quiet and consistent, like water cleaning a wound. The ministry didn't just investigate students, they questioned the teachers too. How could such a large group escape school grounds? Were there signs of negligence? Was there any teacher helping them? Some teachers trembled, especially Mr. Tamuno, who had once received a vague complaint about suspicious behavior, but ignored it. "I thought it was just teenage noise," he explained. But now, that ignorance had consequences. The school board debated whether to suspend some staff. The media demanded accountability. Students failed, yes, one radio host said, but who was watching over them? Madam Okoro sat in her office, wondering if she had failed them all. In the middle of all this, Adeabi's poem titled "We Wore Uniforms, Not Wisdom" was published in a student magazine. It spread like wildfire. Her words were raw, honest, and full of sadness and warning. "We danced with silence, hugged shadows, pretending we were old enough to carry fire. But fire doesn't care about your dreams. It burns, and it leaves scars." Even adults shared the poem online. It became a national conversation starter about youth, social media pressure, and the danger of secret lives. Adeabi didn't attend the party, but her voice became part of the healing. Before the party, Kelvin, Musa, and Lizzie had been close, laughing, joking, and planning adventures. But after the scandal, their friendship began to crack. Musa blamed Kelvin for convincing him. Lizzie felt abandoned when things got serious. "What did we gain?" Musa asked one day. "Look at where we are now." Kelvin shrugged. "We were just living life. They're the ones overreacting." But deep down, even he wasn't convinced. They started avoiding one another, walking separate paths in school, no longer united. It became clear that what had bonded them wasn't trust, but mischief. And when trouble struck, there was no loyalty left to hold them together. Blessing, one of the girls at the party, was the daughter of a popular pastor. When her father found out, his world crumbled. He locked himself in his study for hours. His wife wept daily. "How can we continue preaching when our house is burning?" she cried. Church members whispered. Some left. Others confronted the family. "You should have controlled her better," one elder said harshly. Blessing, ashamed and broken, stayed in her room for weeks, refusing to eat. Eventually, her father knocked gently on her door and entered. He knelt beside her. "I'm hurt," he said, "but I still love you. You are my child, before the church." Those words were the first drop of healing in her shattered soul. Some students tried to move on quietly, but the internet had a longer memory. Screenshots, memes, and videos kept resurfacing. Strangers sent rude messages. Some boys lost admission into private colleges. One girl's wedding dowry was withdrawn by her fiancé's family. Even those who hadn't attended were dragged into the mud, just for being from Royal Heights. Parents in other states began pulling their children out of the school. "This place is cursed," some said. Tina changed her phone number and deleted her social media accounts. She told her mother, "I want to disappear." But her mother replied gently, "You can't disappear. But you can begin again." To help the students heal, Madam Okoro brought in 2 professional counselors. They created a safe space called the Healing Circle, where students could talk without judgment. At first, only a few came. Then more followed. Kelvin finally joined, not to talk, but to listen. He sat quietly while others spoke about guilt, fear, and pressure to fit in. Over time, he opened up too. I thought being bold meant breaking rules, he said, but real courage is cleaning up the mess. The Healing Circle became a place of quiet restoration. Not all wounds healed at once, but at least, they weren't bleeding in silence anymore. Lizzie's mother, a market woman, had always bragged about her daughter. She will be a lawyer, she used to say proudly. But now, customers at her store whispered behind her back. Some stopped buying from her. Her heart broke daily. She confronted Lizzie one night. "You were my pride," she said through tears. "Now I can't even hold my head up." Lizzie fell to her knees, sobbing. "I didn't mean to shame you, Mama. I just wanted to feel seen." They held each other and cried. In that embrace, forgiveness began to form, not because the wound had vanished, but because love refused to let it define their future. The school chaplain, Reverend McKind, organized a night vigil on the field for students, staff, and willing parents. "This isn't just about punishment," he said. "It's about restoration." Hundreds gathered, some weeping, some in silent reflection. As songs filled the air and candles flickered, students knelt in circles, asking God for strength. Tina stood and shared a short confession. "I chase what I didn't understand. I want to become someone my parents can trust again." Even Madame Okoro shed tears. "We are not perfect as adults either," she said. "But this is a time to turn pain into purpose." The vigil marked a spiritual reset. It was no longer about blame, it was now about becoming better. After the vigil, the school held another assembly. This time, instead of shouting or punishment, Madame Okoro invited affected students to share their thoughts. One by one, students walked to the podium, trembling, but brave. Obina said, "I wish I listened to the small voice that told me not to go." Blessing added, "Sometimes, shame teaches you things comfort never will." The crowd remained silent, some students cried, others clapped quietly. At the end, Madame Okoro stood up and said, "This assembly will not be remembered for disgrace, but for truth. You have begun your healing." That day, Royal Heights began feeling like a school again, not a courtroom. The teachers, too, were shaken by the scandal. Some wondered whether they had failed their duty. Mr. Tamino offered his resignation, but Madame Okoro refused. "You failed, yes. But now, teach better. Stand taller. Watch closer." A new mentorship program was launched. Each senior student was assigned a teacher mentor to check in on them weekly, not just about academics, but life choices. It was awkward at first, but slowly, conversations became honest. Students who once saw teachers as distant began to realize they were human too. One student said, "If we had this before, maybe we wouldn't have looked for validation." In the dark. Kelvin had been suspended, but he wrote a letter from home addressed to the school. It was read aloud in the assembly. "To everyone I hurt, I'm sorry. I led the charge blindly, and now I carry the weight. But this punishment is not the end of me. I will return, not as a rebel, but as a builder." The letter surprised everyone. It wasn't arrogant or defensive. It was real. And for the first time, many forgave him in their hearts. Lizzie whispered, "I never thought he could write like that." Kelvin's words became more than just an apology, they became a mirror for others who were still hiding from their truth. Weeks later, the Ministry of Education concluded their investigation. Royal Heights would remain open but was placed under strict reform conditions. A public statement was issued, acknowledging the school's mistakes, but also applauding its recovery efforts. Madam Okoro wasn't dismissed, but she was ordered to attend leadership training. The school would receive new funding for counseling, moral education, and security upgrades. The country, watching closely, breathed a small sigh of relief. "We will rise again," Madam Okoro promised her staff. But this time, not as a school of perfection, rather, a school that teaches truth, growth, and responsibility. And indeed, that promise would shape every chapter that followed. During Moral Week at the school, Obinna was selected to give a speech. He stood nervously in front of the assembly with a paper shaking in his hands. But his voice was clear: "We thought the world wouldn't notice what we did in the dark. But darkness always has a cost." He went on to talk about peer pressure, false freedom, and the power of second chances. "Our scars remind us," he said, "but they don't have to stop us." When he finished, the students stood and clapped. Not because he was perfect, but because he was brave. That moment marked the rise of a new Obinna, one no longer running from shame, but rising from it. Adeebi, inspired by her poetry's impact, founded a student club called the Light Circle. Its goal was simple: to give students a voice before silence turned into regret. They held weekly forums, wrote poems, and even created a podcast. Students shared fears, talked about temptation, and encouraged one another to choose better. At first, only a few attended, but slowly, the room filled week by week. A banner hung in their meeting space read, "We choose light, even after we've known the dark." The party that once broke them now gave birth to a movement of wisdom and healing. After 2 months, the suspended students were allowed to return on probation. They came back quietly, heads low, unsure if they'd be accepted. But to their surprise, there was no booing, no bullying. Just silent nods and open spaces beside them in class. Kelvin returned changed. He no longer laughed loudly or led secret meetings. He joined the Light Circle quietly, listened more than he spoke, and volunteered to clean the school grounds on Saturdays. Forgiveness didn't come all at once, but it came slowly, like sunlight through mist. One teacher said, "Discipline teaches, but grace transforms." Blessing had gone silent for weeks after returning. But during a literature class, the teacher asked her to read a scene from a play aloud. Her voice trembled at first, then grew stronger. By the time she finished, the entire class was still. That day, she rediscovered her confidence. Later, she auditioned for the school drama club and was given the lead role in their next play, a story about a girl who makes a mistake but learns to forgive herself. As she practiced her lines, Blessing whispered to herself in the mirror, "I am not ruined. I am rising." And she was right. In a staff meeting, Madam Okoro shared her heart. "We can't protect students from every mistake, but we can walk with them through the consequences. Our job isn't just to teach subjects, it's to shape souls." She challenged every teacher to mentor at least one student, to build trust, not just fear. "Talk to them before TikTok does," she added, and the room chuckled knowingly. Royal Heights was changing, not just in policies, but in spirit. What had once been a site of disgrace was now becoming a campus of redemption. And for the first time in months, Madam Okoro smiled with hope. Lizzie had once been known as the party girl, loud, confident, and bold. But after the scandal, she found herself empty and unsure of who she really was. She stopped wearing makeup. She avoided crowds. She even considered transferring schools. Then one day, she passed the school's guidance counselor's office and saw a flyer for a girls' leadership workshop. Something inside her stirred. She attended quietly, sitting at the back, but something changed that day. Lizzie began volunteering to mentor younger girls. She talked to them about choices, about the need to pause before following the crowd. Slowly, she became someone new. Not loud, but wise. Not perfect, but growing. Tina had been grounded for nearly a term. Her mother rarely spoke more than 3 words to her, and the house felt like a silent prison. But one Sunday, during a family church service, the pastor preached about forgiveness. Her mother reached for her hand during the closing hymn. "I miss my daughter," she whispered with teary eyes. Tina broke down. "I miss your trust," she replied. That night, they cooked dinner together again for the first time in months. And though the wounds weren't fully gone, the silence was finally breaking. Tina started journaling again, this time not about rebellion, but about becoming whole. One afternoon, the janitor cleaning a damaged locker near the library found a torn journal. It belonged to Kelvin. The pages were raw, full of pain, confusion, and guilt. At first, the teachers debated what to do. Was it a violation of privacy? Eventually, they called Kelvin and handed it to him. He thought they would scold him. But instead, Mr. Tamuno said, "You're more thoughtful than you pretend to be." That moment shifted something inside Kelvin. He began writing more, this time intentionally. His reflections were later compiled into a small book titled From Party to Purpose, which the school used for its new mentorship curriculum. Madam Okoro organized a special student-led assembly where the suspended students were given a chance to publicly address the school. It was risky, but healing is never without risk. Lizzie stepped forward first. "We let you down," she said. "And more than that, we let ourselves down." Obina followed with, "We are not asking to be heroes. We are asking to be heard and forgiven." There were tears in the audience. Even teachers wept silently. When they finished, the school responded not with jeers, but with applause. It wasn't loud or wild. It was quiet, respectful, and redemptive. Royal Heights became the subject of a major newspaper article titled, From Scandal to Standard. Journalists visited and were shocked at how much had changed. "You can feel the difference," one reporter noted. "The students walk taller now, but humbler." Parents who once pulled their children out began asking for readmission. NGOs offered to sponsor workshops, equipment, and moral education programs. The shame of the past had become a seed of influence across the country. As Madam Okoro looked out her office window one Friday morning, she whispered, "Sometimes, the fire that almost burns you down is the one that wakes you up." Royal Heights was invited to a national high school debate tournament for the first time in years. It shocked everyone, especially since the invitation came directly from the Ministry of Youth and Development. The topic, social media, a tool or a trap. Adeabi was selected as team captain. She invited Obina, Lizzie, and even Tina to join. "You've lived the consequences. Who better to speak on it?" she said. They trained every afternoon, working hard to turn their pain into wisdom. At the debate, the crowd was stunned by the poise and clarity of the team. Royal Heights won second place, but more importantly, they won back public respect. The school was no longer known just for scandal, it was becoming known for strength. Musa had been quiet since returning. He kept to himself, focusing on classes, avoiding trouble. But one day in computer class, the teacher introduced basic programming. Musa's eyes lit up. He picked it up faster than anyone expected. Soon, he was staying after class to build simple apps. One was a school timetable planner. Another helped junior students track homework deadlines. "This boy is brilliant," the ICT teacher said. "He just needed direction." The principal met him personally and said, "We almost lost you to the shadows. But now you're lighting the way." Musa smiled for the first time in months. He finally believed he was more than his mistake. Months later, a letter arrived at Royal Heights from the State Education Board. It praised Madam Okoro's leadership and her school's transformation. It ended with an official appointment. She had been selected to serve as a regional director of student welfare and discipline. Though it was a great honor, Madam Okoro hesitated. "I love these children," she told her staff. "They are more than a job to me. But the board insisted. What you did here, others needed too. She accepted the role with grace but remained part-time principal. Her farewell speech ended with words the students would never forget: discipline is not cruelty. And forgiveness is not weakness. Both are gifts when given in love. During a new writing class, students were asked to write a letter to their future selves. Tina stared at her blank page for minutes before writing. Dear future me. I hope you've learned to love yourself. I hope you think before you follow the crowd. I hope you remember that mistakes don't mean you're finished, they mean you're learning. Please don't forget how far we've come. Love. Tina, the girl who once thought it was over. She folded the paper and placed it in a sealed envelope. That night, she slept with peace in her heart. For the first time in a long while, she felt excited about tomorrow. In the school courtyard, a new tree was planted, a small almond tree with a plaque that read, "In memory of the night that changed us, and the mornings that made us better." Students gathered around it in silence. Each student tied a ribbon on the fence beside it, some representing regret, others healing, and some hope. R.A.T laid a copy of her poem beneath the tree. Musa placed a tiny USB of his homework tracker app beside it. Kelvin stood a little behind the crowd, watching. When everyone had left, he walked to the tree, touched the bark gently, and whispered, "Thank you for not letting this be the end of me." A national magazine sent a journalist to Royal Heights to interview some of the students who had turned their lives around. Lizzie, Obina, and R.A.T were selected. Nervous but proud, they sat under the mango tree, answering questions honestly. "What changed you?" the reporter asked. Lizzie replied, "Being caught. That's when I realized secrets don't protect you, they bury you." Obina added, "We thought being bold was about breaking rules. Now we know real strength is staying true." The article was published with the title, "Broken to Bold: How Students Rebuilt a School." It inspired teens across Nigeria. For once, their shame had given birth to something powerful: hope for others. To celebrate growth and encourage expression, Madam Okoro organized a Royal Talent Showcase. Students were invited to sing, dance, recite poetry, or share stories. The night was filled with raw talent and vulnerability. R.A.T performed a new poem, Musa demonstrated his tech projects, and Blessing acted in a powerful stage play about peer pressure. Even Kelvin surprised everyone with a heartfelt monologue about choices and redemption. As the audience clapped and rose to their feet, it was clear, this wasn't the same group of kids from that night of shame. They were leaders in the making, and their voices echoed far beyond the school walls. The school introduced a new honor, the Phoenix Medal, awarded to a student who had turned failure into growth. Obina was named the first recipient. As he received the medal, tears rolled down his cheeks. "I dedicate this to everyone who's ever messed up but didn't stay down," he said. "If we can fall, we can rise. If we can be lost, we can also be found." The whole school gave him a standing ovation. That day, he was no longer just a name on a suspension list. He was a symbol of redemption, and a reminder that youth, though flawed, is never without hope. Months later, Madam Okoro invited all the suspended students and their parents for a private dinner. At first, it was quiet, awkward. But soon, people started talking, laughing, and even apologizing. Parents shared how difficult the months had been. Students talked about lessons learned. There were no speeches, just stories. One mother said, "That party almost broke us. But maybe it was the fire we all needed." At the end, Madam Okoro stood up and lifted her glass. To lessons that hurt, and growth that heals. The room echoed with soft clings and warm hearts. What began as shame had become sacred. The final act of transformation came when the students proposed rewriting the school anthem. They wanted something more than just praise, they wanted something real. Together, with help from teachers and local musicians, they composed a new verse. We were shadows in the night, but we chose to chase the light. Royal hearts, we rise again. With courage born from pain. At the end of term assembly, the entire school sang it for the first time, hands over hearts, voices trembling with truth. Even the youngest students knew they weren't just part of a school anymore. They were part of a story. Royal Heights partnered with a local NGO to start a community outreach program called Teens for Truth. Students volunteered to speak at nearby schools, organize cleanups, and mentor others about discipline, social pressure, and second chances. Kelvin, once a ringleader of rebellion, now led peer talks in churches and youth centers. Tina taught girls about emotional self-worth. Lizzie helped organize sanitary product donations and health talks in rural schools. The very students who had been the center of controversy were now voices of hope. And this time, the cameras that followed them didn't record shame, they captured service. Adeebi's poetry had gained national attention. One of her pieces, The Uniform of Mistakes, was published in a youth anthology that reached educators across West Africa. A university in Ghana offered her a full scholarship to study creative writing and psychology. Her classmates celebrated with pride. "You gave us words when we had none," said Blessing. "Now the world gets to hear you." Before leaving, Adeebi visited the tree in the courtyard and tied a ribbon shaped like a pen. "I'll carry your stories with me," she whispered. And with that, she stepped into her future, armed with words and the wounds that shaped them. Musa's tech skills earned him a Regional Youth Innovation Award. He was granted a summer internship at a Lagos-based startup that developed educational software for schools in underprivileged areas. Before he left, he launched a digital platform called Royal Reform, where students could anonymously share stories, seek advice, and connect with mentors. "Sometimes, it's easier to type what you can't say," he explained. His former classmates became contributors. Even teachers began sharing short notes of encouragement. Musa had turned a scandal into a solution. And in doing so, he proved that brokenness could build bridges. At the end of the academic year, Madam Okoro officially handed over the school to a new principal. Her farewell ceremony was emotional as students, parents, and teachers all wept as she gave her final speech. "You were once children," she said, "but I watched you grow into warriors of truth. Never forget, being caught was not your end. It was your beginning." As she walked out of the gate for the last time, she touched the plaque under the almond tree and smiled. "You didn't fail me," she whispered. "You found me." Years later, some of the students returned to Royal Heights as mentors, donors, or just to visit the tree. Kelvin became a youth speaker. Lizzie worked with girls rescued from early marriage. Obina became a counselor. Tina ran a non-profit. One day, they all gathered under the almond tree with the current students. Adeebi, now a best-selling poet, read a letter aloud. "We once threw a party that nearly destroyed us. But what we didn't know was that pain was our doorway. And now, we are the proof that even the darkest nights can give birth to light." As the students clapped and wiped tears, the story was complete, not a story of disgrace, but of redemption. Not about a fall, but about rising stronger. The party they hid became the lesson they lived.